Good morning, Ron.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well. Welcome to Contemporary Istanbul and to Arte's gallery.
It's such a pleasure. Yeah.
It's always wonderful to show your work.
Well, thank you.
We're currently sat in front of Close Your Eyes. Would you mind just talking me through your technique a little and helping us to understand?
Before I talk about the technique, let me talk about kind of the concept because this work has been kind of a meditation on the things we know, the things we can't know, and the things we will never know.
And it's part of the larger body of work?
It's a larger body of work called Thresholds, there's quite a number of paintings that are in this, because it's led to a lot of investigation on my part about where I find certainty, where I find doubt, where I court, and what I deal with that. On an existential level, it's about not knowing and what humanity does in the face of things we know so little about. And it's ironic that the more we know about the cosmos, the more we know about molecular biology, the more we know about the subatomic realm, we understand that we know less than we thought.
So where does Close Your Eyes come into that?
Because the Close Your Eyes is the imagery that occurs when you're not focusing on seeing imagery, and that kind of realm of knowing that's unconscious.
It's a beautiful title, and it's a beautiful piece of work. The subtlety, I think, comes in when you walk around it, and it changes with the light and the colours and the way that it reflects. You also have a very curious technique that you use. Would you mind taking me through that?
A little bit. I use metallic powders a lot, and I've done that for a number of years. And I like the sense of the work changing. There's some art that's kinetic and the work itself changes and moves. My work is really inviting you to move, because I like the fact that it can't be seen in a definitive way from any one angle. So, and I play with that when I'm painting. I'm looking for opportunities to put down and enhance marks in a way that is optically active because of the reflections. And so I can work different times of day and different kinds of light. And that's, for me, an inspiring part of the process. I lay down gel medium on the surface, and I dust these metallic powders, wearing, of course, lots of masks, right? And then I touch into that with branches. And I'm looking for a way in which the biologic will take root in the metallic. And also then I use tarnishes in the metal, so that for example, it's called it's a malachite blue, which is a natural product of the oxidation of brass and copper. So I'm playing a lot with sort of alchemical notions about the transformation of one pigment into another, one color into a different color entirely, and how that interplays with each other.
And you say you use branches, and we've talked about this before, but they're not always the same ones, are they?
No, I like, this is kind of the fun of it, is using an olive branch. What's an olive branch for? An offensive piece, and a laurel branch. Wisdom. There you go. Right, and so then I'm playing with different flowers and plants and different things. So there's always a subtext that has to do with process, and it's not critical that the viewer know that, but it maybe is interesting if they do.
Yes, I think it is interesting. I think it all adds to the multi-dimensions of your work, because even though it's very delicate, there's obviously a lot of thinking that goes on behind it. I think that they flatter to deceive in the delicateness and the gentle nature of the mark making, but actually there's a lot of thought behind it, and I think that comes across also when you see your work all together. I think it really has. Recently we laid out all your work in the gallery, and you could just see how it all worked together, the pieces, how they linked one to another. And do you ever get that opportunity to see your work all together like that?
In the U.S., my studio is rather large, and I can see a number of pieces all at once. In Spain, my studio is much smaller, and so I don't get a chance to see more than 2 or 3 at a time, if that.
And do you tend to work on multiple pieces at multiple times?
I like to. I prefer to work on maybe 2 or 3 at a time, because what I find is that when I solve a particular optical issue about color relationships in one, very often it applies to another, and so I can move from painting to painting, employing what's in my palette and in different pieces, and that's fun for me, and it promotes the work, and I learn from the work in a different way. because of that process.
I'm sure. And do you read anything in particular? Is there anything that you find inspiring that's outside of the realm of artwork?
I'm particularly interested in neuroaesthetics, how color and form affects the nervous system of the body. Because I think that's actually, for me, more interesting these days in my station in life than our history. Because I'm interested in the science about how we see and what effect that has on our nervous systems. How do I make choices when I'm choosing a color? How do I make choices about what to combine a hot Mexican pink with a turquoise? And what happens optically in that? And is it psychological? Is it emotional? And where do I feel that resonance of when I have it right? Because there is that sense, and if you're a painter, when you know you're making a decision that's the correct one, and you also know when it's wrong, right? And where does that register in the body? And so I'm interested in that kind of thing.
So do you think it is intuition, or do you think it's learnt?
I think it's intuition.
And do you think it could be innate as well?
But I think that the learning comes in because you know how to solve it if it's wrong.
Yes.
I know how to regulate the value of the color or the saturation of a color. Then that's a product of learning. But the sense about what is right and wrong is intuitive.
And have you found that your work has progressed and changed? Do you feel that you're refining what you've been doing? Because you're a long-standing painter with great renown. Do you find that you are resolving those issues? Do you find that things are coming to some kind of conclusion for you, or do you
Absolutely
find
not.
No, you find it's expanding again.
It's expanding. It's expanding again, and I'm content with that. It doesn't confound me that I don't learn more. I'm learning more, but at the same time, I'm learning how little I really know. And so there's that open-ended sense about our existence that I think is fascinating. We human beings are terrible to one another very often, but what we share is this infinite universe. And the very complexity that comprises our bodies and the carpet we're walking on and the painting that we're making is part of the mystery that's still unfolding before us if we can be cheerful about being in doubt and still acting.
Yes. And do you find that the large scale gives you an opportunity to maybe grasp that infinite nature?
Well,
the expansion of...
I've done a lot of mural painting, and so I like painting big, and I like relating objects of art to the architectural settings in which they exist. That's exciting to me, and I just like working big because I like the immersive experience of being surrounded in the work.
Yes. And do you... I know that when I've been teaching that, some people, students of mine, have struggled with the idea of trying to actually create a whole in a canvas, and they often sort of focus right in the centre of the canvas because that's where their eye is. Is that something that you've always intuitively been able to do, to work expansively, or has it been something that's sort of come with experience? Or...
That's a really good question. It goes to some interesting issues. I think there's a difference between looking at something and gazing. And I think for me as a painter, when I find composition or when I find what works in a painting, it's by gazing. It's not by looking at it. But at the same time, I'm doing that, but I'm also running in and fixing a small point because that affects the larger issues and that way in which the eye jumps from one thing to another without really understanding why and how. But it's the optic of the way we see. So that kind of gazing and then looking. Gazing and looking back and forth.
Because there is clearly something with the colour field, which I would definitely go back to the abstract expressionists and say that there is definitely an element of that, but it's much more delicate, I would say, and refined. It's not as abrasive, and I don't know if you would agree with that. Or...
No, I think so. I'm interested in the way everything from watercolor in a field in a tray, or a galaxy expands, or the way something molecularly expands. There's a sense about flow and fluidity and expansion to fill a void that inspires me.
Yes, yeah. And do you? I would imagine your inspiration never runs dry then. That
no,
every day is a different day.
It is. As long as I can stay cheerful.
Yes.
And be optimistic.
I know that when I've worked, when people come and watch me in the studio, they say, you dance around your paintings until, as if you're sort of annoyed with them, and then all of a sudden you're sort of at peace with them, and then it's like that's when they're finished. Would you agree? with that? Do you dance around them? Sort of
I do. I mean, quite literally, the first phase of the painting, they're on the floor. And so I'm moving around them a little bit like a Jackson Pollock. I'm looking for the way in which I can unify the surface in a way but then I have to wait for it to oxidize because I'm working chemically at the same time with the
And
pigments.
you've also explained to me that sometimes you sort of spray into the air.
Sometimes, and I'd like that to rain down and it finds its own form. That doesn't exist in this one, but it does in some of the other works.
Yes. And the colour choices, is it just you fixate on one particular colour at one time, or
This particular series I've been working with the metallics so much, and the malachite blue is a naturally occurring blue, but then I can also use teal and some other colors that are commercially available, so I can mix that. So it's been going from golds and ochres to blues, teals, and greens most often. A few red paintings, but not so much as I used to.
Really? Yeah. Can you see where you'd like to move to now? Do you have another body of work in mind? Or?
Actually, I do. I have one that I'm basing on the Corifar,
Oh, really?
which is a celebration in Spain
Yes.
of the fire run, and it's a
You're going to have to use it then.
it's a devilishly fantastic experience with rains of sparks all around you.
Oh, yes.
And so, and for me, that's such a beautiful metaphor for the complexity of life and the beauty and the exuberance of existence.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Ron. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much,
And,
Chelsea.
yes, and if you want to see more of Ron's work, then please visit Villa del Arte website and look for Ron Mills.